Well, this is the 15th Sunday of Ordinary Time. I know you were staying up late last night thinking about. There's nothing ordinary about these times. Nothing at all. That in effect, the church's language for the liturgy is so archaic as to represent some kind of simple society where there was such a thing as ordinary time, where people farmed and took care of animals and lived in simplicity without the internet, without the news pouring into their heads every single day, every single minute, to keep up with every kind of crisis everywhere on the globe. And then our hearts are supposed to be at peace. How is this possible? Ordinary time does not exist. So we exist in a certain way in extraordinary time. These readings that we have today, I always think like what the church does for people called upon to preach is take 4 dice that nobody even knows what they are, throw them on the floor and say, now make sense out of that. One from the Old Testament, from this prophet Amos. I'll say more about him. And then Ephesians, it says it's a letter of Paul, but it isn't. Then you have Psalm 85, beautiful little psalm that says truth and love will meet, but they can't, because the people that tell the truth are hated. So these kind of words roll off our lips and roll out of the liturgy, but we keep asking ourselves, but when, Lord? When is this kind of saying to come true? And then the gospel, come on. Jesus says, don't take anything for the journey. A staff, no bread, no bag, no money, but sandals. You know, makes you think his father was not a carpenter, but a shoemaker or in some kind of business. So odd in a way, and yet so stark. Such a stark kind of mission they're sent on. This does not belong to the time of the church, of great religions, of global civilization. This is backcountry religion. This is religion fundamentally that's drawn down to some kind of simple essence. Don't even waste time with people that won't listen to you. Shake the dust off from your feet and move on. This is a really striking kind of saying for Christ. I'll say more about this at the end of my remarks, but it's, in a sense, the first expression of the Christian mission in Mark, the first expression of what mission means. That is such an inward today in religion, evangelization and the new evangelization and the mission of the church in the world. And then we're sent back to this passage that talks about the 12 going out and casting out devils. It's something you would hear on the news from Arkansas. This doesn't sound like our world at all. But the church takes the 4 dice and says, Leavitt, go to it. Make some sense out of this, which you didn't choose. When you looked at the passage, you looked at the readings, They weren't the readings that you were thinking about. You were thinking about Haiti. You were thinking about a billionaire going up in the sky this morning into space because he's got so much money he can explore that world. You were worried and thinking about all the stuff that the news was sending your way. That's on everybody's minds. You weren't thinking about Amos or what was going on in Ephesus or some poet singing about truth and love or Jesus telling 12 fishermen, don't take anything, but be sure to have sandals. It's important, I think, when we come together for Mass like this, that we acknowledge the truth of the situation that we're in. One of the striking things about Amos as a prophet, for those of you who've studied or read anything about prophets, you know prophets are universally hated by priests and by kings and by wealthy people. In the Old Testament, that's why Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, says to Amos, get out of here. We don't want you around. And then Amos has to basically say, well, listen, I'm just a shepherd and I tend trees, but the Lord told me go prophesy. Amos is profoundly pessimistic, and I think it's Jeremiah, maybe it's Ezekiel, maybe it's both of them, said, you can always tell a true prophet because they're pessimists. They're pessimists. They think basically left to ourselves will make matters worse, not better. They're not Pelagians. They're not optimists. They're not Americans. They're not the kind of people that have to cheer everybody up that it's getting better and better. It's how you become a president. It's how you become a leader. You tell people it's going to be better. But the prophets are the people that tell us, no, it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse because what you rely on is not God, but yourself. What you rely on are the impulses in the human heart to greed and to power. That's why it's going to be worse. But the church constantly says to us, in the scriptures, listen to the prophets, listen to the pessimists, listen to the people that tell us that, not so that we can condemn other people for not obeying the word of the Lord, so that we can condemn ourselves. The prophets are not sent to make us righteous. They're sent to make us humble. They're sent to make us honest. They're sent to make us truthful. They weren't beloved figures. So the church introduces us whenever we have a prophetic text at the beginning of the liturgy. It introduces the liturgy with a pessimistic person. Sure, there's wonderful visions in Isaiah, wonderful visions in Ezekiel, wonderful text in Hosea about love, wonderful things that are true too, but the whole theme of the prophet is cult is dangerous. The cult is the dangerous thing. It's dangerous because it makes people feel better than they are. It makes people feel closer to the Almighty than they are. They are full of rapture at the music and the melody and the mystery of the cult, full of rapture. And then they walk out and persecute their neighbor. That's why the prophets didn't like the cult. And indeed, some of the religions in America that split off from the Catholic Church a long time ago, like the Congregationalists in New England, where I grew up, I got congregational blood in me. That's why I'm talking like this morning. So like a certain kind of Presbyterian nastiness. Jonathan Edwards. But it's basically the church sort of waking us up and shaking us awake to what is happening, a deeper level in the human spirit. So God said to Amos, go prophesy to my people, Israel, because God loves them and because they mistake the ritual commandments for the moral commandments. They mistake the liturgy for life. And the prophets try to wake them up and shake them alert. So you don't read the prophets to be consoled. You read the prophets to be stirred awake about yourself. And then this wonderful reading from Ephesians. It's a reading we do for those of you who do the prayer of Christians, the divine office. It's the canticle we sing every Monday for the 4 weeks of the office, Monday evening prayer. It comes from Ephesians. And scholars consider it sort of like the Pauline version of the Johannine prologue. The prologue begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. It's a poem about creation and incarnation. But Ephesians 1 is a poem about something else. So I'll read it again to you and hear it as a poem for early Christians, a canticle, a song. And it deals with such things as predestination, a word that we don't use today. But my Calvinist and congregational forefathers did. They weren't afraid of those words. Uses a wonderful expression that has always touched me, the fullness of time. In the fullness of time. That's not how we think that time is somehow pregnant. It's getting bigger and bigger, and the belly of it is swelling out, and something is within it. Something is within time. Something is growing there. And Yeats felt, is it a demon, or is it the Christ that's growing there in Bethlehem? But for the Pauline community and for the author of this hymn, the fullness of time means some kind of gathering up of everything into Christ. By God, not by us. By God's doing. The fullness of time. The German emigre Rosenstock Hussey once said the task of the first millennium was to make of all different faiths one faith. The task of the second millennium was basically to send us back to the beginning in the gospel. The task of the third millennium will to be unite the diverse branches in the human community, men and women, different races, Christians and Jews. And I would say this in this letter to the Ephesians. Jews is on this writer's mind. He's basically speaking as a Jew to Jews about Christ and basically saying, you were the first ones who dreamed about the Messiah. So you gave that to us, and now we're telling you who it is, what it's about. Christians have to learn how to think like Jews again. They have to learn to think like the prophets and the promise and the hope for the Messiah. Not that the Messiah is some kind of past thing. We've never believed that the Messiah came and then left, and somehow we just spend our time remembering that. But that the church has always said, as we say during the Mass, and he will come again. It refuses to put the Messiah in the past. People would like to do that. Sometimes we feel we'd like to do it. But the Messiah belongs to the present and to the future. The messianic power in the fullness of time, as Ephesians says. So let me send one final word about mission. My feeling is that what happened in Protestantism, especially in more liberal strains of Protestantism, was to break away from a centralized religion and to allow the Spirit to work, so to speak, on the margins of the faith in little communities. This is like a Protestant community, maybe in more ways than I mean to say, but basically that's what Teresa's idea was. I want little monasteries. Don't let them get big. Let them spring up all over the place. And let the genius of the Carmelite vision blossom in different places. But what happens, as many have said in Catholicism, is that canon law takes the place of the Spirit. We don't need the Spirit because the Spirit's pretty dangerous, and it sometimes leads people to believe they have a true Spirit when they don't. Things get very messy and very confused, like democracy is. And people want order and peace. And so everybody writes today about the rise of authoritarianism in Europe, in the United States. Even that little crazy president in Haiti was trying to be an authoritarian. So people basically say, you know, it's democracy or it's authoritarian. What do you want? And the president of China is saying, we're going to survive, you guys, because you'll be killing each other, fighting each other, hating each other, and people will be telling the truth, and everyone will hate them for telling the truth. And so you basically be like a family quarrel from here on in because you don't believe the same things or have the same values or the same convictions. But we in China will have them. And we'll be around when you're long gone. So the Christian message sort of has elements of that in it. The Catholicism of a unified global church that does everything the same everywhere. The Protestantism of the congregational local community that does what it can do by its own lights. How does this have to do with mission? I would say this, to use an American expression. We have to turn Catholics from consumers of religion to producers of it. You consume a religion like you consume fast food. You feel you need consolation, pull up to the church and get some. You feel you need some kind of inspiration, pull up to the church and get some. But nobody's producing the religion. They're leaving it to me and to them and some people in the parish. And those are the producers, the people hang around the sacristy up there by the organ, the people that are there before I arrive. They produce it, I just get it. I pay for it a little bit. I don't want to get it on the cheap. I want to pay for it, so I chip in. But I don't see myself producing the religion at all. I don't see myself the way the church says you're all missionaries. I don't know how to be a missionary. I don't know what that means. I just try to live my life in a decent way and do the good things to my neighbor. But the local Protestant churches that spread out across America, from the Methodists to the Congregationalists to the little Presbyterian chapels, those little churches with no more members than in this monastery thrived. They were farmers. They kind of understood, if you don't take care of your local home, the local thing, then you'll have nothing. So they worked hard for it. But the Catholics came as immigrants into these great churches that they built out of reverence for Poland and Italy and Ireland and Germany. They came there, and then they got well off and they left, And now the big white elephants are all over the place in the city, and the bishops don't know what to do with them. St. Michael's Church in Baltimore is now a brewery. Have you been there? It's a brewery, and they even make a mockery out of the metaphor. They call it the ministry of brewing. The ministry of brewing? Are you kidding me? So what will make our religion survive are little communities like this that stream messages out and that bring people together. Monasteries that are supported, not because they're doing the religion for us, but because they're a place where we can all do the religion together, where we can all come and leave with a little bit of a feeling, I need to be a producer in this thing, but the Lord sent us out with nothing. I noticed there are a lot of sandals in here this morning. So at least we're following him that far. But he sent his church out with nothing. In effect, that's what the text says, nothing. And yet, 2,000 years, we're still reading this stuff. But who's reading Caesar's Wars? Except kids trying to get an A in Latin in high school. Who cares? The power in this religion is unbelievable. And we have to tell our neighbors about it. It's not sentimental religious people who are living in the past. It's the people who believe that the Messiah will come again.